おじいさんのアニメクラブ
Welcome everyone to the first ever episode of OG-san's Anime Club. I am OG-san, and I'm super excited to finally get started on this project. It's a project that's been in the back of my mind for quite some time now. I'm a longtime fan of anime, getting my start in the late 90s with things like the OG Toonami block. Thanks for everything, Tom. Also renting my first subtitled VHS tapes of Samurai X from a local comic shop. Memories, and I'm telling you, I never lost any steam as I spent all the cash that I made from my high school job on whatever Tokyo Pop manga I could get my hands on. I even met my wife at an anime convention over a decade ago, though she's always quick to point out that it was specifically a Pokémon convention. But my love of anime has never faded, and now as I close in on starting my 4th decade on this planet, I've decided to finally embrace my new AKA and utilize my OP skills as a podcaster in this audio isekai as OG-san. You know, that OG that you see at the cons dressed as Engine from Gachi Akuda. That same OG hiding the new grays behind that gas mask but never losing any steam at the rave. That very same OG who just wants to nerd out with fellow Nakama about anime both new and old. I've got a lot of stories to tell that range from that one time a kid brought Record of Lotus War tapes to our middle school anime club back in 2001, all the way to my thoughts and opinions on what's airing right now in the spring 2026 season. I'm truly grateful that you're here to listen, and I'm hoping that you'll stick around and join the anime club, which is a website that's currently a work in progress, but until it's finished, you can send me an email at ogsansanimeclub@gmail.com. And I'll be sure to let you know how you can join in the fun and in the conversations, because let's face it, Anime Club is no fun with just one guy. So let's have some conversations. Enough of this intro song, it's gone on for far too long now. Here are today's topics.
1
Why you should be watching Witch Hat Atelier with impressions of the first 6 episodes.
2
The true story of the banned Pokémon episode that put children in the hospital.
3
The engaging show about art design that came out of left field. Eren The Southpaw. Let's begin.
レッツゴー
Alright, so let's begin with our first topic on this episode. I absolutely have to talk about Witch Hat Atelier. All my friends in my circle seem to be loving this show. If you haven't seen it, you really ought to do yourself the favor of checking it out. I'm a big sucker for fantasy anime in general, but there's a few things about this show which, as of this recording is 6 episodes in, that have really captivated me. I want to skip over just how beautiful it is visually, and frankly, I think it's stunning, because the thing that really gets me hyped up with this show is the music. Just take a second now and just imagine Star Wars without John Williams' score. You can't. It would not be the same thing. I feel the same way about Witch Hat Atelier and the music composed by Yuki Kitamura, whose body of work includes things like the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring. Picking up on the motifs when certain emotions are surging in the show seems to make my heart rate increase, like a dance between the motion on the screen and the stirring crescendo of 2 flutes in harmony, heartily fluttering through the wind. It's flowery expression, sure, but it really is just that good, and it's an absolute standout in anime music composition this season for sure, in my humble opinion. Let's talk a little bit about the story. So, we meet a young girl named Coco who is helping her mom out at her fabric shop, and she's super skilled as a live-in apprentice, basically. And this gets commented on as being pure magic, if I remember the wording correctly, by a character with a pointy hat named Keyfree. Coco as a child was inspired to one day be able to use magic that makes people happy when she met a mysterious magician in a dark alley who gave her a picture book that fueled her imagination for years to come. The thing about this world is that no one really knows how magic is done, but there's a belief that you have to be born as a magician. Coco's mother, being a realist, pretty much doesn't feed into Coco's dream, not out of malice, but just from a logical standpoint so that her dreams don't get crushed by cruel reality. Her mom is also a single mother who is really tough because she needs to be both parents, so I actually really liked her personality as a character, and I thought it was really well done. Before I go on any more about the story, I do want to talk about the name of the show. So the English name for this show, as you and I both already know by now, is Witch Hat Atelier. While watching the first couple episodes, I noticed that the word most being used was Mahotsukai, which I've always taken to be magic user. The first time I picked up on that word was with Common Rider Wizard, which Mahotsukai was translated as wizard. So I thought to myself, maybe it was just a gender thing, wizard, warlock, witch, what have you. But the men in the show who are Mahotsukai don't seem to be described with any different words. It's not really a big deal, but it's the sort of thing that catches my attention, especially when I looked at the Japanese title for the show, which doesn't even have the word Mahotsukai in it. The Japanese title for Witch Hat Atelier is Tongari Boshi Atelier. So, what does that mean? Tongari Boshi means pointed hat, and atelier, spelled with katakana to inscribe foreign words in Japanese, is the French word atelier, which means studio or workshop. So put them together, and what have you got? Pointy Hat Workshop, which, after looking into it, makes Witch Hat Atelier not a poor name for the show after all. So in this world, the Mahotsukai, or mages, or witches, I haven't quite decided how I'm going to refer to them regularly, are designated apart from the general populace by their pointy hats. Kifri, the man who was watching Coco draw her lines with expert precision before cutting the colored fabric he requested, as I mentioned before, is wearing a pointy hat. And his skills as a Mahotsukai are called upon by some other customers when their magical flying carriage gets damaged by some nosy village kids. He offers to fix the problem as a spellcaster, but requires privacy to practice his art. What's the big secret? It's just the way of this world. Well, Kifri entrusts Coco to keep watch to make sure that no one comes in the workshop while he repairs the carriage. But when the aforementioned village brats come to sneak a peek, Coco can't help but look for herself as well. I mean, after all, when is she going to get another opportunity like this? Being a Mahotsukai is her dream, and this is her one chance to see how magic is actually done. Coco manages to see Kifri at work, who's using a pen and ink to draw the magic spell on the carriage components that allow it to fly, hover, move, etc. After being 6 episodes in and learning how the shapes, size, and orientation of certain pen strokes directly impact the strength or potency of the intended effect, well, this made me want to describe what the carriage did as more than just fly. Kifri doesn't realize that Coco knows the secret. Magic is cast by drawing. So he's unaware that Coco starts practicing drawing spells from the picture book given to her as a child. She never made the connection that the mysterious shapes were spells. When she gets a little success, she's absolutely elated. But the happiness doesn't last for long as she ends up drawing a spell that essentially crystallizes her whole house and traps her mother, possibly even killing her. Kifri manages to save Coco, who unknowingly cast forbidden magic. This is where the story gets pretty interesting, because protocol dictates that her mind needs to be erased. But when she explains that she was drawing spells from a book given to her by someone with a pointy hat, particularly a brimmed pointy hat, Kifri sees it as an opportunity to solve a mystery regarding these brimmed hat sorcerers that are spreading chaos through seeds planted like in Coco's situation. He also seems to be interested in possibly helping Coco save her mother, and even to want her to realize her obsessive dream of becoming a Mahotsukai. But I'm not entirely sure that it's not at least partially self-serving. Kifri is an interesting character because he seems to be a bit of an outlier in the magic world. Maybe troublemaker is a better word to use. Not erasing Coco's memories of this event is a direct violation of the rules, as pointed out by a character we meet in episode 6 called Alrugio. I'll get back to this tsundere here in a minute. But Kifri also shows a crazy harsh side when he throws a menacing look at a character to get him to comply to a request. It was a complete 180 to his calm and kind nature. I'm very interested in finding out what sort of beef he has with these brimmed Mahotsukai, because there's very clearly a story to be told. So, Kifri takes Coco in as an apprentice at his workshop, and he has 3 other apprentices as well. These girls couldn't be any more different from each other, but they're each great in their own ways. Agate is kind of a big jerk. Tetia is a sweet, outgoing girl, and Riche is a quiet and very capable girl. Her voice actress kind of reminded me of Kana Kamui from Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, but it's not the same. So anyways, there are going to be obvious growing pains, especially considering the girls have heard the rumor that the new apprentice used forbidden magic and possibly killed her mother. I won't recount every little thing that went on from here, But let's just say that there's a trial that Coco went through that was a beautiful presentation of animation and music working hand in hand. And I'm really looking forward to rewatching the episodes when I get the opportunity, hopefully next time in an English dub, because I caught a little bit of it on a YouTube clip and it sounds awesome. I would like to comment on episode 5 because I feel like this is an absolute masterclass in animation. The first half of the episode was par for the course, but y'all, Keyfree versus the dragon. I mean, I just got chills thinking about it. Guys, you absolutely have to watch this show. Bug Films is totally knocking this one out of the park. I'd also like to take some time, hopefully in the future, to take a look at the staff members as far as direction, production, and design, and compare that to their previous work. But that'll have to come at another time. I am very interested in digging into that, however. Now back to that old tsundere Orugyo. Orugyo, it just rolls off the tongue. He seems a bit gruff and cranky. But the fact of the matter is that he has a soft spot for the apprentices, and even Coco, as is becoming more apparent with their interaction in episode 6. He basically has a threatening keep out sign on the door. I think it said that anyone who comes in will be cursed. But he leaves his door cracked open. And after Coco leaves his chamber, he purposely doesn't latch the door again, because it's not like he wants company or anything like that. He's kind of like the dad who doesn't want a cat, but ends up becoming best buds with it when the family brings it home without listening to his protests. And speaking of pets, that leads me to the brush buddy, which is some kind of little fuzzy weasel thing that doesn't have any facial features really besides big old beady eyes that's impossibly cute and fluffy. I jokingly told my wife a couple days ago that the brush buddy was my favorite character in Witch Hat Atelier, but I think it's actually true. So I'll close out this segment by listing my top 5 favorite characters, because frankly I think 3 is too few. First place is Brush Buddy. Second place is the blue-haired apprentice Riche. Third place is Tetia. Fourth place is Orugyo. And fifth place is Keyfree. And I would like to issue a formal challenge to this show to somehow get Agate to break my top 5. I highly doubt it, but I've got a feeling that this really unlikable character has a lot more depth than is currently being let on. I invite the listeners to please share with me your thoughts on Witch Hat Atelier. It can be whatever you'd like to say. You can even give me your top 5 favorite characters. But send those messages to me via email at ogsansanimeclub@gmail.com. Alright, let's move on to the next topic in today's episode.
おじいさんのアニメクラブ
This next segment is all about the true story of the banned Pokémon episode that put children in the hospital. Come with me on a little journey back in time, if you will. The internet was still young, there were only 151 Pokémon as yet discovered, and the principal just made an announcement effectively banning Pokémon cards at school, claiming that the game was a form of gambling, and such things would not be tolerated any longer. Someone stole Kyle's Charizard holographic from his gym locker, and no one knows who it was. And the only way you were going to get a Growlithe in Pokemon Blue was to trade a Vulpix with your buddy who had link cables. But don't let Mrs. Gentry see that you're doing it, because she'll lock both your Game Boys in a desk drawer, and then nobody wins. It was a simpler time, and lucky for me, it was a cherished part of my childhood. Everybody had Pokemon fever. And to help feed that need to catch 'em all, we also had our very own anime to watch with, hands down, one of the most epic opening theme songs to this day. We didn't have instant access to global information like we do now, and a lot of the anime news and rumors came from message boards and forums on the basis of trust me, bro. I remember hearing about an episode of Pokémon that had flashing lights that supposedly triggered epileptic seizures in those who were watching it on television. Kind of like the telephone game, parts of this story were muddled with wrong information, and a bunch of us at school were under the impression that Pikachu's electricity was just too bright and that the children's eyes couldn't handle looking at it, so they fainted. It faded into memory as I got older, and I eventually just assumed that it was as much of an urban legend as Super Saiyan 8. But as wikis became a thing, it wouldn't take us brainwashed Pokemon completionists long to notice that there were some episodes of Pokemon that never aired in the United States. While looking at this list, my mind instantly went back to the lunch period conversations about the Pokemon episode that sent thousands of kids to the hospital. Could it actually have been true? It wasn't until much later that I was able to get my eyeballs on this particular episode that I learned it to be more or less true. What really happened? Well, I'm now going to talk in more detail about the legendary 38th episode of the first Pokémon show called Den-no Senshi Porygon. The English equivalent would be Cyber Soldier Porygon or Computer Warrior Porygon. So here's the story. There's an issue at a nearby Pokémon Center with the Pokéball transmission device. The Pokémon are going in, but sometimes a less rare Pokémon comes out, or even nothing at all on the other side. Ash, Misty, and Brock meet the scientist who created this transfer system named Professor Akihabara. He's insistent that there's nothing wrong with the hardware or the programming, but does notice something particularly disturbing. He doesn't reveal what it is to Nurse Joy or to the trainers, but they end up seeking him out at his residence. After a trial, they are ushered in and more or less forcibly transferred into the digital world alongside his personal creation, the CG Pokémon Porygon Unit 1. He explains that a strange group stole his Porygon Unit 0 and then used his transfer device to enter the cyber world through a PC. He surmises that they must be the ones who are stealing the Pokémon as they're being transferred between PCs. This group of thieves is none other than Team Rocket, called Rokuto Gang in Japanese. Akihabara-sensei can't just put in a strong antivirus software to solve the problem, because if he did, the humans inside would die. So he's using Ash and crew to solve the problem digitally instead. When they find Team Rocket, a fight ensues and each side uses a Porygon against the other, which is essentially a stalemate. While the fight is going on, Ash removes the blockage that Team Rocket was using to stockpile all the Pokeballs. Unbeknownst to our heroes, Nurse Joy called in tech support of her own, and is having Geek Squad install antivirus software, which is now threatening the lives of everyone in the digital world. If there wasn't an actual health issue caused by this episode, one might jokingly guess that the episode was removed from syndication for getting kids interested in watching more digital monsters on a competitor that came soon after. One might also say that Pocket Monster execs couldn't prove that Digimon copied their idea from this Porygon episode because they couldn't show the episode as proof. Silliness aside, the problematic aspect of this episode happens when the antivirus software causes a system error with its weapon. Essentially, it caused a huge explosion that nearly killed the humans inside the PC, and Nurse Joy bars the IT guy from ever using that command again for fear of damaging the transfer system and the Pokémon still trapped inside. This buys time for everyone to get out of the cyber world, and thanks to the last electric shock from Pikachu as everyone is re-entering the physical world, the antivirus missiles explode again in a rapid flurry of flashes between two solid colors, red and blue. And this is the exact problem with this episode that caused issues for many who are watching it. So what happened? Allegedly, the flashing of blue and red at that frequency induced photosensitive epileptic seizures in over 600 people who were watching this broadcast on December 16, 1997. This became known in Japan as the Pokémon shock. Once news started coming in about this bizarre occurrence, the Pokémon anime went on a 4-month hiatus until they could figure out what exactly happened and how to prevent it from happening ever again. The episode was pulled from syndication and not aired in any other country. While I recently watched this episode for the first time with my wife, I was extra cautious and turned on all the lights because who knew if I could be similarly affected by this malicious antivirus software? Which, saying that is actually kind of comical considering how harmful antivirus software ended up being for so many people. When we got to the scene in question, my inner 12-year-old was still expecting Pikachu's electricity to cause me instant blindness. I held my breath, squinting, but unwilling to look away. This may be the last thing I ever see, but at least I'd know the truth behind the urban legend of Pikachu's epileptic shock. I didn't know the red and blue flashing was the actual source of the problem until I saw it, because I actually found it to be very uncomfortable to watch and immediately had to look away from the screen. It didn't have any effect on my wife, but I certainly found it to be a bit jarring to watch, nothing more than that. I'd like to take this opportunity to read some information from the May and June 2001 issue of Skeptical Inquirer that cites many contemporary articles that analyze the Pokémon shock phenomenon. I encourage you to seek it out because it's actually a very interesting read, but I'll just share a bit of information from the Pokémon Panic timeline to give authentic figures to those of you watching or listening right now, so that you can decide for yourself whether this mystery is a case of mass seizures or mass hysteria. Tuesday, December 16th, 1997, 6:30 p.m. Pokémon Episode 38, Computer Warrior Polygon airs. The flashing lights segment begins at about 6:50. The Fire Defense Agency claims that between 6:50 and 7:30, 618 children were rushed to hospitals with convulsions, headaches, and vision problems. Tuesday, December 16th, 1997. Later that night. Evening News reports that hundreds of children were taken to hospitals from Pokémon fits. Some news shows then rebroadcast the scene suspected of causing the seizures. A second wave of children, number unknown, is affected upon hearing the news. Wednesday, December 17th, 1997. Pokémon attacks are the talk of the schoolyards. Television and newspaper headlines Wednesday morning were dominated by the reports. The number of victims reported in the media ranges from over 600 to over 700. Thursday, December 18th, 1997. Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper reports that nearly 13,000 children had at least minor symptoms, with 685 taken to hospitals. Friday, December 19th, 1997. Yomiuri Shimbun reports on completed investigations by the newspaper and local boards of education, finding the number of children reported to have experienced fits, nausea, and other symptoms to be 11,870. So that's some definite food for thought there. But while you're marinating on that, I want to talk about a very interesting public service announcement that preceded the first returning broadcast of Pokémon after that 4-month hiatus. And it was given by a woman named Miyuki Yadama, about whom I can't seem to find any information at all. Who is this woman? She's surrounded by tons of Pokémon plushies, balloons, and a corkboard covered in letters from children begging for the show to return. I'm just going to tell you everything that she said. April 16th, 1998. To all our viewers. Good evening to everyone in front of their TV. Starting today, the Pocket Monsters anime will be back on air. But first, would you please listen to an important message from me? Please ask the adults to listen in as well. As you probably know, many of your friends felt sick while watching Pocket Monsters on December 16th last year. Some even had to go to the hospital. First, we would like to apologize to them and their relatives once more. She bows. This is the first time something like this has happened to people watching TV anywhere in the world. While we knew those who were looking forward to the next episode would be a little disappointed, we put the show on hold for a while until we knew how such a thing could have happened. We immediately put together an investigation team and consulted specialists in the field so we could both learn the reason behind what happened and how to create anime that is safe to watch. This research was not just conducted by the TV station, but also with doctors and the government. At this point, she holds up a poster board showing a drawing of a satellite on top of a TV station building, and also a government building with a kanji for kuni, which means country, and 3 doctors in white coats discussing papers around a conference table. She continues, the research revealed that the main reason behind what happened was a scene where red and blue screens would rapidly alternate 24 times a second. She holds up 2 pieces of paper, one red and one blue. In other words, red and blue switched like this at a very fast speed. At first, it was believed that very strong light or dangerous pictures had been involved, but that was not the case. In addition, we now know striped and swirling patterns as well as the color red should be used with caution. We will be very careful in the future, of course, not only with the future airings of Pocket Monsters, but other anime as well. She then shows a bunch of letters that were received rooting for Pokemon to start again. Then the camera pans to the Pokemon plushies, which appear to be thanking the viewers in their own language, as in a lot of Pika-Pees. Miyuki has one last request of everyone, and that is to watch television in a bright room, sitting as far from the TV as possible. I think we've all heard that one. And that right there is the true story behind one of the most unbelievable moments in anime history. I think the Porygon's next episode preview after episode 38 is also remarkable because episode 39 has a very controversial story as well. I'll touch on this episode as well as 2 others another time in the future, but I hope you've enjoyed learning about this banned episode of Pokemon. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think the numbers point to mass hysteria? Or do you think this episode absolutely needed to be pulled from the rotation? You can share your thoughts with me in the comments or send an email to ogsansanimeclub@gmail.com. and I may respond in a future video. And with that, let's move on to our next topic.
おじいさんのアニメクラブ
The final segment of today's episode is going to be about a show that really surprised me. Eren the Southpaw came across my screen as I was perusing the new titles for the spring 2026 anime season. And without taking too close of a look at the key art, I instantly assumed it was going to be a show about boxing. You can understand why I would think that, but the show called Hirarikiki no Eren couldn't be further from Hajime no Ippo. Hirarikiki is a compound of Hidari, which means left, and Kiki, which means dominant. So you could also call this show Left-Handed Eren, but her art isn't expressed in the boxing ring, but rather on a blank canvas with paint. As of this recording, there have been 5 episodes of the anime aired in this season, which is getting a total of 13 through the end of June. The story begins with the high school students considering their future career paths with things like school options, and we meet a character named Koichi who is dead set on becoming a designer. The show has him cross paths with a girl named Eren, who is a left-handed artist the show is named for. And interestingly enough, they only seem to inspire each other from afar, as Koichi's path in the professional arts separates him from Eren. I'd like to take a few moments to express what initially caught my interest about this show, and that would be how it hops around in time. The story starts in 1998, which if you've listened to any of my content before this, you understand the nostalgic tug I get from stories set around this time. But we go to different years in the first decade of the new millennium, and even back to 1992 as we meet some characters older than Koichi. As confusing as the name for the series was when I first happened upon it, I must confess that I still am not entirely sure what this show is about. As in, I don't know as if I could explain it in one sentence, at least not now. At one point I was sure that this show was going to be about spray can graffiti artists, and you'll forgive me if I also thought that this show was going to be centered around a character named Eren. But after 5 episodes totaling around the 100-minute mark, I'd say that this show is almost exclusively about Koichi's career as a designer, and Eren takes the place of a silent muse for him. There was a moment where I almost dropped the show because I thought it was going to get a little too sad, but it managed to keep me hooked with a bit of a twist. I'd like this review of Eren the Southpaw up to its halfway point to be as spoiler-free as possible, so I'm going to leave out certain details that you can experience for yourself. But I feel very compelled to try to articulate why it is that I think I'm enjoying this title so much. I think, for me, this anime has been a bit of a mirror. Now, mind you, I'm no artist by any means, but I do see a lot of parallels in some of the raw details of Koichi's relationships with his peers and coworkers. I work in construction myself, particularly in concrete, and I am absolutely captivated by the ebb and flow of departments under a single umbrella that are at the same time distinct and a necessary element of a team. I could have swapped out the industries in that previous sentence because I see the same push and pull in Koichi's advertising and art design company, between the sales team, the managers, the suits, the newbies, the senpai, all of them. In my own career, I hear how the mixer drivers push against the batchmen, the plant operators push against quality control, and sales creates work that proves to be difficult for all the departments, and yet, if even one of these team members falls short, the entire team will fail. As I was watching this expressed on the screen, that really hit me in such a powerful way that it made me feel grateful for the ability to work with my peers. And when an anime makes you examine your life through another lens and generates legitimate appreciation for the people around you, then how could I offer anything but positivity about it? This show feels real. It reminded me of discussions I had with my high school guidance counselor, as well as other people who encouraged me to go in one direction or another with a bright-eyed view of the future. But I've only ever found that it was not at all like I had expected, not in any single way. And as you watch Koichi struggle and succeed, you get an opportunity to cheer for those wins and brush off those failures alongside him. I'm quite eager to see the next episode of the show, and I'm enjoying the presentation well enough that I want to respect it by not diving headlong into the material that preceded it. But I will give a tiny little history lesson about how we got this anime, as I find it to be somewhat peculiar in its path to animation. Eren the Southpaw originally started as a web manga, written and illustrated by Kapi, a mangaka who prior to making manga studied design at Musashi no Art University, and worked for the Tokyo agency as an art director, a copywriter, and a commercial planner. The web manga was serialized on cakes from March 2016 to September 2017, and was eventually adapted into another manga with a new artist, Nifune, while Copy remained the writer. Running from 2017 to 22 and once again resumed on Shonen Jump Plus in March of this year, it went on to be adapted into... Are you expecting me to say the anime next? Well, you'd be wrong, because it was first adapted into a 10-episode live-action television drama in the winter of 2019. Interestingly enough, the anime adaptation was not announced until 4 years later in December 2022 from the studio's Signal MD, responsible for animating the likes of Recovery of an MMO Junkie, and Production IG, which most likely has had a hand in at least one thing you've watched through the years. I find the animation to be of good quality, and the pacing to be perfectly respectable. The flashbacks occur at understandable times and create empathy for characters that would otherwise seem to be creating friction for no good reason. I'd like to comment on the music perhaps another time, because I'm giving this impression from memory, and though I hate to admit it, I haven't found the score to be particularly remarkable. It certainly isn't bad by any means, but it's not really sticking for me. That, however, cannot be said about the opening and the ending themes, as those are rock solid and pass through my mental headphones multiple times a day after watching this week's episode of Eren The Southpaw. Let's talk about the opening theme, which no doubt got Jujutsu Kaisen fans off the couch. The song is called Funkin' Beautiful, and that's spelled Funkinbeautiful by A-L-I. That's a lot of spelling. And it features the Japanese rapper Zorn. It's got a nasty, stirring tenor saxophone that just dirties the track up, forcing the listener to get their feet moving. I really like the ending theme as well, which is called New Walk by Ima Murasaki. I've not listened to anything else by her, but I really like the vibe of this song, mainly because it reminds me of a song from one of my favorite slice of life shows in the summer 2023 season, My Tiny Senpai. The track it puts me in mind of is Sugar by Yuka, and that continues to be one of my summer jams, and New Walk really just gives me similar feelings. I like Eren The Southpaw a lot, and I fully expect to watch it to completion. I only have one request that I'm sure will get fulfilled in due time. Let's get more Eren! I like Koichi well enough, the kid at least has guts, but I'm itching to see what my girl Eren has gotten up to. I'm also curious to know if there's anyone else out there who is enjoying the series as much as I am. Can you relate to any of the workplace dynamics Koichi is going through? Are there any other anime you've watched that feel like someone's holding up a mirror in front of you? I'd be happy to read your thoughts in the comments, or you can send them to me at ogsansanimeclub@gmail.com, and I may even respond to them in a future video.
おじいさんのアニメクラブ。
Alright Nakama, we're going to bring this episode to a close now. Let me tell you about some of the things I'm currently getting into that may shed some light on future episodes of the podcast. I've been reading the Dandadan manga as much as I can after finishing the second season of the show because I absolutely could not handle the cliffhanger with the truth existing out there somewhere. Since I've been reading it, I've been pretty consistent on it, squeezing in chapters whenever I get a break at work. It's been very enjoyable for the most part, and I'd really like to talk about it sometime. But I haven't decided if I'm going to be touching on manga story beats or just stick to talking about the anime. I understand there are some who would rather experience stories played out spoiler-free on the screen. With that in mind, I'm trying to decide on whether I'll have manga-dedicated episodes from time to time, or perhaps just make videos about them on our YouTube channel, separate from the podcast. Feel free to let me know what you think. I've also been working very hard to get caught up on that time I got reincarnated as a slime, but I'm watching it with my wife, so our schedules have kind of slowed that progress down. I wanted to finish Season 3 before the Tears of the Azure Sea movie came out, but as of this recording, that was about 10 days ago, and I'm relatively doubtful that I'll finish Season 3 before it runs its course in theaters. That is, if it's even still in theaters now. My spoiler-free opinions of Season 1 and 2 are that they are awesome and thrilling, but I've found some of the political episodes to be a drag in the third season. And unfortunately, the setup to battles around tables seem to take up the vast majority of screen time. I'm not giving up on it, as I'm pretty invested in the characters, but I did want to share where we're at on that. I'd love to see how Season 4 is shaping up. It's only a matter of time. And with that, I thank you once again for spending time with this OG who loves to ramble on about the good old days and share his opinion about the current state of anime as well. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I count on you to let me know if you have. Please comment and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching on, because it's the only way to find out what happens on the next exciting episode of OG San's Anime Club.
楽しいだ。またね。